Chris Benoit, a Canadian, aged 40 years old at the time of his death, was a professional wrestler who worked for numerous wrestling companies around the world, including ECW, WCW, New Japan, and at the time of his death, the WWE. Benoit had held 22 championships over his time as a professional wrestler. He was a two-time world champion, including once in WCW and once in the WWE. And he was actually booked to win a third world championship at a WWE event on the night of his death. So this man had achieved many great accomplishments in his wrestling career. He had a lovely wife, he had 3 children, a very successful wrestling career. He had it all, some might say. So what would lead a man over one tragic weekend to kill both his wife and his 7-year-old son? Well, that is a question that we may never know the answer to. There are still conspiracy theories out there saying that Benoit was framed and he had nothing to do with it. And by the time he got home that day, his wife and his son were already dead, and then he was murdered himself. It's just a theory. Other theories blame the Benoit tragedy on the concussion that he had suffered. Scans were taken of Benoit's brain, and apparently he had the brain of an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient from all the knocks he had taken in the ring, apparently. So some people blame it on that. In any interviews you hear from any of Benoit's friends, they will tell you that Chris was a really nice guy, a shy guy, a quiet guy, but how he wouldn't hurt a fly. Others say yes, he was a very intense person. He was quiet and he kept to himself a lot. But they would never suspect that he would do something like this. So what is the answer? Again, we may never know. But in this video, we are going to listen to some very revealing interviews from the likes of Chavo Guerrero, who was a friend of Benoit's. He actually received text messages from Chris Benoit over that weekend when the murders took place. And we also hear from other people who knew Benoit and how they think that he was framed and that he could not do something like this and the whole thing was a setup. And we also look at that mysterious Wikipedia post that announced Nancy Benoit's death 14 hours before the police had even discovered the bodies of Benoit and his family. Now that one was strange. But guys, before we get going, I have to say, Benoit, ever since I saw him in WCW back in 1997 when I really caught on to WCW, he was a wrestler that really stood out. He made everything seem so real in the ring. He was very dedicated to what he did. He was very intense, and you could tell that he just gave it 120% each time he got into that ring, which made it so good to watch. So as an in-ring performer, yes, he was definitely a favourite of mine back in the day, and many others of course. He was a well-liked wrestler for what he could do in that ring, and if you were a fan of Benoit's at the time, it made it even that more incomprehensible to believe that Chris Benoit could do something like this. I am not a conspiracy theorist, I would have to say. However, I think all avenues should be looked into any case before you can 100% pronounce somebody guilty. And whereas all the evidence in this case, supposedly by the police, has pointed to Chris Benoit being guilty in a horrendous crime such as this, there is still that little bit of doubt where you say, was he framed? Was he set up? Did Chris really do this? Could he really do this? And we will be looking at all those avenues in this video. Now we're going to be kicking it off here with an interview that Bob Holly did. Now he is a former WWE superstar and was a close friend of Benoit's. So basically the Benoit tragedy took place over a 3-day period from Friday the 22nd of June to Sunday the 24th of June. And Chris had an appointment at the doctor's office that Friday morning. Now after that appointment he phoned Bob Holly. Now Bob was actually meant to go and visit Chris just a couple of days earlier on that Wednesday approximately, but Bob never got around to doing it. So Chris was, just a wee bit angry at this. So here's how the conversation went. Why didn't you come over? Well, I figured you just got home and wanted to spend some time with Nancy. No, I was waiting for you to call me. We were going to get something to eat. Next time I'll come over, Chris. Oh, all right. And so the two were just having small talk between them back and forth, and then Bob Holly said, "How are you and Nancy getting along?" And Chris responded by saying, "She's acting like Hitler." Bob Holly would laugh this comment away, as the way Benoit had said it was kind of comical at the time, so it was just laughed off. Holly says that Benoit sounded fine on the phone. However, apparently after this conversation took place, it was then that Benoit went home and took the life of his wife Nancy. And Bob Holly is quoted as saying that he just now wishes, of course, that he had just spent some time with Chris on that Wednesday, and that maybe the events that happened on the Friday and that weekend would not have happened and things could have gone a lot different. So Bob has felt some guilt over this in the past. However, I would say to that no, if it hadn't have happened that weekend, it probably would have happened some other time, and that Bob's visit maybe would have just been effective as putting a plaster over the situation. So he should certainly not feel any guilt towards that at all. And I would say that in a situation like this, as sad as it is, it was just going to be a matter of time, and not one little stop-by visit could have prevented this in the long run, it seems. So some interesting things to come out of that Bob Holly interview. He said Chris seemed fine on the phone. He had just been to the doctor's office, so he was acting quite normal. And then that must have been the time right after that conversation with Bob that he went back to his home. And it was Nancy, his wife. Her life was reportedly taken at that point. So that was on the Friday, the 22nd of June. Now we fast forward to the next day, Saturday, the 23rd, and we have a very revealing interview here with Chavo Guerrero. Of course, Chavo knows what it's like already to lose somebody close to him in the wrestling industry. He lost his family member, Eddie Guerrero, who was like a brother to him. But he was actually speaking to Benoit on Saturday, so this would have been after Nancy had died, and Chavo was actually speaking to him on the phone. And as you will hear in this interview, Chavo was just saying how Benoit sounded really off, he wasn't himself, but at the end of the conversation, he did make a point of telling Chavo that he loved him, and he just thought that was a bit strange. So let's check this out.
So now it's Saturday morning, early. I land in Dallas, my connection, and we always get on the phone and coordinate what time you get in.
Yeah.
The whole deal. I'll pick you up or he'll pick me up, whatever. So I call him, no answer. Then all of a sudden I get a call from him, and he's like, "Oh, call right back. Hey Chavo, hey, what's up, man?" He sounds just off. I'm like, "Man, you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm cool, man. Just really bad. A really, really just bad weekend. I just, Daniel and Nancy are sick, his wife,
So you're actually talking to him at this point.
I'm talking to him, yeah. And
this is basically after he's probably killed his wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They're sick, and they're not feeling good. And I'm like, all right, cool. And, well, you coming in? Yeah, I missed my flight. But don't worry, I'm going to catch another flight, and I'll be there. Okay, I go, just call me when you get in, and I'll pick you up, no matter what time it is. We were landing in Houston. I had to drive to Belmont, and I was like, don't worry about it. We're late. No, I'll wait for you. Okay. So he gets getting ready to get off the phone, and he goes, he makes a point of it stops. He goes, Chavo. I go, yeah. And he goes, I love you. I said, I love you too, man. It wasn't too off kilter, because we always tell each other we love each other.
Yeah.
But this was really forced. It was not forced. It was really like made a point of it. It was like, hey man, okay, I love you, brother. Okay, no, it was like, Chavo, I love you.
I want you to understand this.
Basically, if you
don't forget this.
Coming from a man with very few words.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I love you too, bro. So I hung up, and I thought, that was strange. So I called him right back, and I go, hey man, are you all right? I'm fine, man. Like I said, I just had a real hard weekend, and just real hard weekend, and I had to go take him, Daniel and Nancy to the hospital, and I'm like, oh, okay, man. Well, I'm here. Okay, man. Okay, cool. So then hung up, and that was the last I actually talked to him.
So that was on the Saturday, a very strange conversation there that Chavo had with Chris Benoit, and with Benoit saying things like, I love you, making a point of it, and also saying that he felt a bit off and that things hadn't been so great that weekend because Nancy and Daniel were apparently in the hospital. Well, of course, as we all know, Nancy was not alive at that point, so... But now we go on to another piece of audio here. We fast forward to Sunday morning. This is 5 a.m. on the Sunday morning, the 24th. Now, there was actually a pay-per-view that night in Houston. Chris Benoit was supposed to be wrestling for the ECW World Championship, and he was apparently going over that night. He was facing CM Punk. A big match, a huge match, and nobody had heard from Chris. And in this next piece of audio here, you will hear Chavo Guerrero again as he talks about some very mysterious, very strange text messages that not only he received, but his roommate Scott Armstrong also received, who was with Chavo at the time. They both received these strange text messages. Not only from Chris Benoit's phone, but also from Nancy's cell phone as well. And the messages were very strange in what they said. So let's check that out now.
So we drive to Houston the next day, me and Scotty, and
still no word.
Still no from Chris. We're calling him, okay, nothing. I get some texts on my phone at probably 5 a.m. and I get text from Chris.
So you wake up in the morning, you've got these
not
texts.
Even before. It woke me up before
the
5 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the my text and I'm like, that's weird. It says the dogs are in the enclosed pool area. The garage door is open. I looked at it. I was like, well, that's weird. Is this one of those texts you get? You know, sometimes you get texts, from 3 days ago you never delivered, and then all of a sudden you got a text. And this is kind of the start of texting. Now it's a little different. But back
it was
then,
2007.
A lot of times, texts didn't come through and they got lost, and all of a sudden you got them. And I was like, well, that's
you get
weird.
half a text.
Half a text, yeah, that was weird. So okay, I wrote it off. Then I get another text from Nancy's phone, from his wife's phone, and it said the same thing. The same text. That's really weird. Okay, whatever. I kind of wrote it off. So then I had to get up in 2 hours. So I got up. I look at. I go downstairs to meet Scotty Armstrong, and I look at him. I go, "Did you get anything weird last night happen?" And he goes, "Yeah, I got some weird text from Chris." I said, "Me too. Did it say this?" He goes, "Yeah." So we call Chris. No answer. No answer. No answer. That's weird. So we go to the pay-per-view. Chris isn't showing up. And they're asking us, where's he at? I'm not sure. We're not sure where he's at. Now we're covering for him. We think maybe,
blatantly lying for him now.
We're blatantly, whatever. We're just covering from him. No, I haven't heard from him. I don't know what's going on. Okay, great. Didn't tell us anything about the text, nothing.
Did you feel something was going on weird at this point?
Something was going on. Something was going on. And I remember Arn Anderson saying, this is later on in the day, because he was supposed to wrestle the pay-per-view.
He was supposed to wrestle for the title.
The ECW Championship against CM Punk. He was supposed to wrestle him, and this is a big match.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Arn Anderson saying, you know what, if Benoit didn't show up with no word, he's either has just taken off to like Alaska and is going to be like a merchant marine or something, or he's dead basically. That's I remember him saying that, not meaning it is he's dead, but there's something going on for him not to show up.
So let's look at those text messages that Chavo received. Now, this was the Sunday morning, very early on a Sunday morning. So apparently Nancy passed away on the Friday, and apparently Daniel, Chris's son, passed away on the Saturday, and apparently Chris died on the Sunday by taking his own life. They are just approximations, no one knows 100% for sure, but that is what has been widely reported to have happened. So by this stage, Nancy and Daniel have both passed, and Chris would be the only one alive. And looking at those text messages, they just make no sense at all. The dogs are in the enclosed pool area. The garage door is open. They just make no sense at all. Chavo thought maybe they were partial texts or old texts maybe. They just make no sense at all. Were they a cry for help? If Benoit had been taken hostage, were they some kind of message that one of the hostage takers was sending to the other hostage taker saying, hey, the dogs are in the enclosed pool area, don't worry about them, they're safe, the garage door's open, you can come in, if you can follow what I'm trying to say there. one of the bad guys saying to the other bad guy, hey, don't worry about the dogs, they're taken care of, you can come in the house now. And somehow Benoit got a hold of these texts and just sent them from his phone or something, just as a cry out for help. That's just a total conspiracy theory. I'm not saying that happened at all. Just trying to make sense of a text message that you just cannot make sense of. So continuing down that same line now on conspiracy theories and other things that may have happened, we go to an interview here with Bill Apter. Now, some of you guys may know him out there. He is a photographer and a journalist specialising in professional wrestling. Now, he had an interview with Chris Jericho, and he had something very interesting to say. He thought that maybe a hit, like a professional gang hit or something, was put on Chris Benoit and his family, and that when Chris got home that day, Nancy and Daniel were already dead, and the whole thing was made to look like a big cover-up. Now, there are people out there who have this theory, and guys, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. We see this sort of thing on crime TV shows and movies all the time, but it isn't beyond the realms of possibility for somebody to cover this up in this way and make it look like Benoit had actually committed the whole crime. Again, I'm not saying that this happened at all, but let's just check out this interview here. It's Bill Apter.
So I'm going to tell you what's not in the book, what I think may have happened, and I may be totally wrong, and people are going to go, this is ridiculous. How could you ever think of this? I think somehow Chris got in some sort of trouble. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was after or whatever, but I think something happened. I think when he got home, Nancy and his son were already dead. And I understand that husbands and wives kill each other sometimes. They do. But not the boy. Mm-hmm. This is what didn't make sense to me. To me, if a hit, a murder, is done in a professional way, they can make it look like you did it and you committed suicide as well. To this day, the Chris Benoit I know couldn't have done that at all. To me, they were dead. He got in some sort of trouble. They were murdered. And when he got home, he was murdered, and they set it up to make it look like he committed suicide. Oh, only again, because I knew they had a volatile relationship, he and Nancy. There were a lot of issues and all that. But because of Daniel, the boy, and how enamored he was with Daniel, I still today can't fathom that he could do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's definitely the mystery of all ages. You know, something that we'll never
Maybe
know.
I'm right.
Well, it's as plausible as what the official explanation is.
Which is not. There isn't one.
And there isn't one. It's been very kind of shady and dropped and all that sort of thing.
And what do you think?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to kind of. I would say if I'm talking rationally, I would say concussions. I would say the same thing that happened with Junior Seau and all these type of guys, where they're having the talking with Chris Nowinski about how the brain hardens and gives you dementia and makes you hear voices and
I've thought of that
drives
too.
You insane. You know?
I've thought of that too, but I just it's Daniel, the son, that makes no sense in this.
And nothing makes sense about it.
Yeah.
You know, so it could be concussions, it could be rage, it could be demonic possession. For all I know,
Maybe.
There's no real closure on that. You know what I mean? So, like you said, it's one of those things that I don't think we'll ever know.
So he's saying that maybe Chris got into a bit of trouble, some kind of a hit was put on him and his family. I'm not saying that happened at all, but I'm not saying it didn't happen either, or something similar to that. And so it isn't just Mr. Bill Apter who has this opinion on what may have happened to Chris Benoit and his family. Other WWE superstars have also come out with similar theories that Benoit could not have done it. They knew him, they knew his personality, and he just isn't somebody who would do this sort of thing. Hornswoggle, for example, former WWE superstar, the little dude who comes out from under the ring, we all know him. He has come out publicly and said that there's no way Chris Benoit could have done this and he must have been set up. So there are people out there who hold this theory, and I'm not saying that's what happened at all. Maybe Benoit got into a roid rage, maybe it was concussion or something like that, and maybe Benoit indeed did do this. He may well have, but we're just looking at all possibilities here. And so now we move on to that controversial Wikipedia post, and for those of you out there who don't know about it, Basically, here's what happened. At around about midnight, 12:01 a.m. to be exact, Monday morning had just clocked over, in other words. Now, bear in mind that the 3 bodies from the Benoit family, they were not found until around 2:30 on Monday afternoon. So this is around 14 and a half hours to be exact after this Wikipedia post came through. And the post said, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife Nancy. Now, this post came through on Wikipedia, as I said, at around Sunday on midnight. The bodies weren't discovered until later on that day at 2:30 in the afternoon, around 14 and a half hours later, so nobody knew that the Benoits were dead at that stage. Nobody. Now, the IP address of the person who wrote this in Wikipedia was traced to Stamford, Connecticut, which is also the location of the WWE headquarters, as we all know. Now, after the news of this early death notice, we'll call it, reached the mainstream media, the anonymous person who wrote this accessed Wikinews to explain his edit as a huge coincidence and nothing more. Wow, a huge coincidence, alright. Police detectives seized computer equipment from the man held responsible for these postings and called the posting an unbelievable hindrance to their investigation, but believed that he was otherwise uninvolved, declining to press charges. The man claims that he had found several rumours online which supported his theory about the Benoit family emergency, as reported in the wrestling news. So the guy who wrote this about Nancy Benoit being dead before anybody knew about it claims it was just a complete coincidence. So that's apparently what it boiled down to, guys. A complete coincidence. Damn. I don't know. As Farouk would say, this isn't a funny situation, of course, but as Farouk would say, there's just no words for that, but damn. Writing that Nancy Benoit was dead before anybody knew about it, long before anybody knew about it, and then she actually did end up dead? Wow. How unlikely is that? I guess it's possible, and apparently that's what happened, but make of that what you will, guys. Unreal. So in this video, guys, we have looked at both sides of what may have happened in the Chris Benoit case. I think it is good to look at both sides of an argument, because unless you were actually there yourself and saw it with your own eyes, you can't 100% say this is what happened. Although, I will be honest, it does appear that Chris Benoit did commit these crimes. It does appear that his brain was severely damaged. It does appear that he did indeed become quite deeply religious in the final stages of his life. Of course, that doesn't mean that you would commit these crimes just because you become religious. However, sources state that he had become quite paranoid, and you add up the fact that he had been overprescribed steroids from his doctor and they weren't doing him any good at all. Combine into all that, there has been a well-known history of domestic abuse between Chris Benoit and Nancy Benoit in the past. They had even filed for a divorce in the past, but it was reconciled at the last minute. So apparently Benoit was prone to have a violent temper at times. The police investigated it thoroughly, and that's what they came up with. They found the bodies of Chris Benoit's family, Nancy and Daniel, with Bibles placed beside them, and also a Bible placed beside Chris Benoit's body as well. So is that just another sign of Benoit being a bit over-fanatical with his religion as well? And continuing on in that vein, we have an interesting statement here. So, a suicide note was never discovered during the initial investigation, but a note was later discovered in another Bible that had been included in Benoit's possessions that was sent to his first wife. According to professional wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer, there was a note that was found in a Bible by the mother of Chris's 2 children, Martina Benoit, who lives in Canada. The Bible was mixed in with Chris's personal belongings that were shipped to them. Chris Benoit's father, Michael Benoit, stated there was a handwritten note in there, and it said, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." So, Make of that what you will, guys, but that is a note that Chris Benoit left in his Bible. So you can make of that what you will, but it seems that Chris Benoit may well have not have been 100% all there mentally. It does seem that way. So my opinion, I'm saying, yes, it looks like all the evidence points towards Chris Benoit is guilty, and he committed these terrible, heinous crimes as has been stated. That's certainly how it appears. However, I still do not denote that outside chance that there was possibly a burglary in the house, a house invasion. He is a famous person, he is a celebrity, and he was living in a pretty private area. It was pretty open, it was rural, it wouldn't have been exactly hard for any skilled burglar or anyone like that to come in and do that sort of thing. So that is an outside chance, but anything is indeed possible. Not everything is always as it seems. And so, of course, when this happened, Chris Benoit was totally removed. His name was totally removed from all WWE releases. There were no mentions of his name. None of the great matches that he had could be released on DVD. The company just completely forgot about him and parted ways with Chris Benoit, and that is completely understandable, of course, in a situation such as this. There was a time when it would be almost impossible to find Chris Benoit's name on the WWE Network or any of their content. However, in recent times, there have been some more of Benoit's matches resurfacing on the network, and you get the odd mention of his name here and there. And that's just another really crappy thing to come of this. That guy was such a good and talented wrestler in the ring, to have all his matches now just forgotten about. I remember when Chris Jericho said when he released his DVD, he couldn't put any of his matches that he had with Benoit, and they were all the best matches he ever had. So that's just how good the guy was. However, if Chris Benoit is indeed guilty of committing these heinous crimes, and it appears as though that he is, then someone who does something like that deserves absolutely no mention and deserves to be forgotten about. Because that is such, obviously, a terrible thing to do. And even though I mentioned that, yes, back in the day, Chris Benoit was one of my favourite wrestlers in the ring, but that doesn't count for squat, not when it comes to this. If he's guilty of this, then you just got to forget about the guy. And it can be hard to do, but you have to separate Chris Benoit, the wrestler, from Chris Benoit, the person who may well have done those criminal acts that day. In my mind, at least, you just have to separate them and just still watch his matches and enjoy his matches if you can, because he was a very talented man in that ring. And I don't believe that if he did do this, which it seems as though he did, he was definitely not of a sound mind, and it wasn't the Chris Benoit that everybody knew and loved, but he just wasn't obviously himself, and something had gone terribly wrong, maybe with the drugs he was taking, steroids and things like that. So I'm guessing they really are two separate people. So this video has covered several different aspects of the Benoit case, looking into other theories and possibilities, as well as the main story that we all know. But when looking at the Chris Benoit tragedy, only one thing is for sure. This was one very dark day for the entire Benoit family and for all professional wrestling fans around the world. Thanks heaps guys for tuning into the video. Be sure to drop a scorpion death drop on that like button and subscribe to the channel for more awesome pro wrestling action from the WWE, the WCW and much more.